Matthew, in the midst of this group 1, group 2 project you're already working on, Congress passed the fiscal year 20 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 848. And you, I believe, or the Army actually was in the midst of its short range reconnaissance program looking for small UAS group 1 and group 2 to better the force there. So all these things kind of converged at the same time. And hence, is that how Blue was born, basically?
In a way, yes. Yeah, the NDA, rather, the fiscal year 20's 848 really came out while we're already working on SRR and working on Blue UAS framework, at least the first version. We call it Blue UAS framework 1.0 now. So we received that while we were already doing prototyping with companies. It was a bit of a perturbance, right? It didn't have us think differently and understand where that language could affect our programs. But ultimately, we were already on the right track before that even hit. It did provide guidance that we didn't have before, which was interesting when you're halfway through a program to get some new inputs that you've got to now work within. But we were able to work closely with the folks at OSD about how we would implement that section as well. You know, Congress puts the language down. The DoD is then up to the task to interpret that and make it work for us. And I think we've done a fairly good job at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is about trusted technology, cyber secure, sustainable, autonomous, things that can be interconnected, modular open system architectures, etc. And by the way, everybody, if you're not tracking Section 848 and you're in this industry, that is for the DoD, the ban on Chinese drones and components specifically. But what Matthew's saying is that they were already underway looking at all of these other relevant features. And so that's a great segue, I think, to talking to Chad a little bit, because Chad, you plugged into this program pretty early. So tell us, first of all, about ModalAI and why you created it, and then we're going to talk about that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So ModalAI, we started in 2018, right around the time of the Blue UAS, or as Matthew said, the Group 1 UAV architecture, in which we, funnily enough, had to ask after we were on contract. We were afraid to ask what Group 1 meant before we were on contract. After we were on contract, the first question was, so actually, what is a Group 1? And so we've got that figured out now. I think it means under 17 pounds or 17, 8, something like that.
I think it's under 20.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
smallest. Yeah, it's the small. You know, DoD has their own lexicon for the sizes that doesn't track the FAA's terminology. So yeah, Matthew's exactly right. So anyway, Chad, go on.
Yeah, so we spun out of Qualcomm, which Qualcomm's a large semiconductor company here in San Diego, California, and I had led robotics R&D there at Qualcomm, and we had built a lot of highly integrated, sophisticated technology around, of course, Qualcomm's processors to go put in unmanned aerial systems. And so when we started in 2018, we had a nice running start, and in fact, we had, I think 4 days after we formally left Qualcomm, I was pitching DIU on the Group 1 UAS architecture. And that led to, of course, us being involved in this framework program very early on. We had, in reference to the CSO that Matthew was talking about, we were made available. We read it and looked, oh my gosh, like, I think this is exactly what we want to do. And so that's how did we get involved? We read it, the language read exactly what we were already doing. It was like they had kind of put our product spec on the sheet of paper. So we applied and pitched, and I think by that November we were under contract, mid-November or so, 2018, under contract. And so then we were off to the races, and the output of that, well, we can give a little bit of a background. I don't know how deep we'll go later, but that we had our first generation voxel, which highly leveraged what we were doing at Qualcomm.
Can you lift it up a little higher?
Yep.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so is that the voxel flight, Chad, that you're showing us right now?
So it's about to be, because that is what came out of that first generation program. So the voxel flight, or I'm sorry, voxel, and then we have flight core, and then we fuse those two together into a single board configuration we call voxel flight. And
Gotcha.
so that was the guts of that first framework effort.
Okay, and going back to Matthew, so clearly Chad was making autopilots and they were interoperable and perfect situation for him and modal AI. But what other components are holistically part of the Blue UAS framework?
That's a good question, and it's changed a bit too, because NDAA's FY20 did affect what we did for Blue UAS Framework 2. But right now we kind of bucket into really 4 categories. One is software protocols. We've done a lot of work in software protocols. That includes ground control station software, flight control software, protocols by which they speak and communicate. We've done quite a bit of work with pairing and networking for small UAVs. That's kind of one big bucket that has a lot of folks that work underneath us doing that kind of work. The second, third, and fourth are very much tied to NDAA. Cameras are on there. That's one of the components that was called out as being, under policy by covered foreign countries. So cameras and gimbals became one of our topics of framework components. The third one would be flight controllers, also again under the NDAA, and the fourth would be data links and radios.
Interesting. I mean, we're not going to get into the debate here, but I know there's a bunch of drone pilots out there, especially in the public safety crowd, that would be like, what's the big deal of cameras? It's not the camera itself. It's like some kind of connection, right, to a back end internet or where it's going in the server. But very interesting that Congress went that way. By the way, everybody, we've got some folks in the chat I want to call out. We got Ramon Roche, Drone Code Foundation. We love Ramon. He's saying, can't wait to hear more. And Paolo De Petris is saying, asking Chad actually a question. When are you releasing an Ubuntu 20 image for the Voxel 2?
That's a good question. Getting very specific early on.
Very specific early on. We haven't even talked about Voxel 2, but I figured I'm going to forget to ask if I don't ask now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have built a Ubuntu 20 image. We're a little beholden to Qualcomm on that because kind of the core, we of course modify the kernel, modify the OS, but that core initial drop comes from Qualcomm. So we have to follow their roadmap, and we lag their roadmap, by 4 to 6 months or something like that. So we've built it internally. We have not done much testing, so it's coming. It's early in the year, so you always think early in the year. You're like, oh, it'll be just 3 months away, and then it takes longer than you think. But the first half of this year, I'd say pretty comfortably, Ubuntu 20 should be ready.
Okay, excellent. Now we've alluded to it, so I'm just going to talk about it, and I'm going to go back to Matthew. Matthew, we're in Blue Framework 2.0. So tell us kind of the transition there, and what's the difference between 1 and 2?
Yes, so 2.0 really happened in early 2020. We were started to plan for it a bit in 2019, but we knew we wanted to do a refresh. The first CSO that we did for Framework 1, which again had 5 OTAs issued, I believe, to 9 companies. There were a bunch of subcontractors involved. We began planning that late 2019. We issued the CSO, I think it actually was the Friday when the whole world shut down due to COVID, when we found out that, the sky's falling.
Yes.
So, that CSO ran. It was a bit different. We didn't do live pitches during that. We did everything virtually. And another piece that really, 2.0 was aided by was the ability to work with industrial policy under OSD. They assisted with some of the CARES Act funding that was given from Congress to assist with companies that were struggling due to COVID. So we actually were able to expand 2.0 from beyond it was initially to add more companies because of the partnership with BPA Title III at that time frame. But that really was a direct response to NDAA FY20. When that language came out in 2019, we looked at it and said, wow, we need to fill in the gaps. And that really was the catalyst for that 2.0. 2.0, we awarded everything in July of 2020. So again, during lockdown phases, we're still issuing contracts. And the new companies that came under 2.0, ModalAI, again, received an award. Flight controllers was part of the solicitation, so ModalAI received an award for the Voxel 2 development. We also worked with Doodle Labs on the Helix radio. We worked with Immervision on their Octopus camera, their low light navigation camera, with Scadio on the Scadio Link low-cost ASIC-based data link. We also work with Vantage Robotics on a swappable gimbal camera interface system. And another company, actually not far from Chad, Obsidian Sensors, was working under them for a new type of microbolometer, a thermal camera. So, a lot of really good work, but again, you could tie it back to cameras, data links, and flight controllers, which again, the NDAA was now providing some guidance around.